Okay, I got a feeling we're going to have a couple roll in here, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everybody here this evening. Appreciate you coming out on a really important evening for the city of Summersville. And I want to thank all the guests that are online. Looks like we have Shay, we have Mayor Robert Schaefer, and Councilman Stevie LaRose. Are there anybody else? Nobody else? Okay, fantastic. So I want to thank them for showing up tonight, especially you, Shay. Very important that you show up. And I'm going to get right on into the agenda here. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the meeting held on October 18th, as presented with corrections. Looking for that, plus waive the readings if I could.
Move to approve and waive the reading.
Okay. Second. Thank you. We have a first and then we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, opposed, like sign. Thank you very much. Next up would be the public comment, unless Ray has not signed up to speak, so I think we can go forward with the rest of the meeting now. We're going to move right on into Shay. Shay, again, I want to thank you for coming. I enjoyed our discussion the other day. It was exciting hearing some of the things that you had ready for us. I do want to point out, Shay, that everything that you sent to us, we did send to the Planning and Zoning Commission. I've also made printouts for everybody, so everybody has printouts here in front of them, so they should be able to follow along with you.
Sounds great.
Okay.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it very much. Yeah, so thank you all for once again having me here at your Planning Commission meeting, although virtually again. For where we're at now in the process, after our last meeting, I asked you all a few questions, got a few recommendations, what you all feel comfortable with me working on or not working on pertaining to your current draft of a comp plan. What has been accomplished since our last meeting? All public comment and all public input and recommendations and feedback that were given from WDU's Extension Service and the public has been implemented into a draft comp plan. So that's fully completed at this time.
Great.
With that, what you all are looking at in the handout that's been given to you is a new subsection that I've cut out of it. So there were these tables inside of the draft comprehensive plan that listed out all the goals, objectives, and strategies, just in a very kind of shortened format, which is always a good reference and a way to quickly read through your comp plan and understand where you're at and where you're going. So what I've done is remove these tables, and I've reformatted them in a way in which we are going to include 2 additional items and extra columns with those goals and strategies and objectives. And that is whether the items may or may not require capital funding, and this is a way of satisfying the legal requirement of doing a budget, understanding the budget needs for your comprehensive plan. And the other thing, which is really the big item that I want to discuss tonight with you all, is the priority level. If you look at that there, you can see that that column is blank. And Gary, I'm assuming that's what you said everyone's got, correct?
Yes.
Everyone can see that?
Yes.
Okay. So that column is blank. What I would like to propose is a very simple system in order to fill out the requirement for you all to have a timeline, a general timeline in order to implement your comp plan. So what I would like for you all to do as the advisory body to the city council, and of course you all being more familiar with the city government, the neighborhood, and the community currently, especially than what I am personally as an outsider, is I'd like to ask you all to fill that column out. So what I'd like to do is have these filled out by each attending member or other city staff, really anyone that you all as their advisory body to the Planning Commission would recommend. Fill one of these out in that column as individuals. You could do it as a group, but I think that may be a bit time consuming potentially. You could dedicate probably an entire 2 to 3 hour meeting just for that. Or if you fill them out individually, and if Gary or Amy or someone there at the city can scan them and send them back to me, I'll compile all of the responses from everyone, assess them, and then summarize them into a final chart And what I'm wanting filled out into that column is one of 4 answers. And really, we could abbreviate this with just using 4 letters. So I'm thinking about it this way. Short term, things that you will accomplish in 1 to 3 years. Midterm, things that will be accomplished in 3 to 6 years. Long term, things will be accomplished 6 to 9 years. You can see the pattern. Or use the term ongoing to talk about things that don't necessarily have a definitive deadline, right? Things that you will continue to do. Like there's recommendations in here such as maintain adequate police force for response. So you have 24/7, 7 days a week police response. That would probably be ongoing if you already have that type of police service, right? So you go down this list with these tables and you write, you can even just do 1 letter. S for short term, M for midterm, L for long term, and O for ongoing. And just fill out each of those blanks there to the left, and then submit them back to me. And this is how we could formulate a timeline. And this is the same format it would be in your comp plan. So it'd be easy, quick reference for all city staff and constituents to understand when these goals should be accomplished. Now, I also want to stress, I get that you all are what we would call lay planners, right? You're not like a paid professional full-time planner like myself, and maybe you might feel less comfortable assigning a timeline to this, but the goal of me asking you all to fill this out isn't for perfection, so please do not let your hesitancy prevent you from wanting to dive into this and maybe assign things. That's why we're doing it as a collective, as a larger body and a larger group of people to compose those things together. And then if I see some obvious like glaring issues with that timeline, such as maybe something that should happen before another strategy, but is listed as a later step, I will adjust that as I go through myself as your all's consultant and fix that in there. And I will do all those little fixes. So we're not looking for perfection. We're just looking for a general consensus of when we think some of these goals should be accomplished. As well, we're not needing this to be any certain percentage. It's however you feel that each of these goals should be done. If there's a lot of short-term ones, and very little midterm, and very little long-term, then that's just how you feel, and that's okay too. We're also not looking for any certain percentage or any restrictions. I don't want to convolute this process any more than what it needs to be. I think we can make it very straightforward and simple. One time, go down and just write in the letter that you believe relates to each strategy. Does that make sense?
Yes, sure does.
Okay. Is there any questions about that part of my request?
No, I think it works well for me. Would there be a way to open this up, Shay, where we can do it like some folks may be more comfortable doing it on paper? Would there be a way that you could send it so that we could do it via the computer and fire it back to you that way?
Oh yeah, virtually?
Yeah.
I could, let me think about that. Yeah, I could actually put together I can use Google Forms. It's free, and that's actually how I, surprisingly, even for like a city the size of Fairmont, that's how we do a lot of our public input.
Right.
It's just Google Forms.
Yeah.
And I could put it in there, and it could just be multiple choice for each of the strategies. And then, so for the folks who want to use a computer to do it, you can do it that way. And then I instantaneously have it back.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. I mean, I'm sure it's probably going to be half and half. There'll be half of us that will probably want to use paper, and the other half that it'd be easy. I mean, it's easier for me just to sit there at the laptop and go through it and send it to you that way. But it might be easier for others. But at least the ones that are doing it on the computer, you'll get it instantly, and you can get a little bit head start with those counts. But if that's going to require a lot of time, it's no problem for me just to do it by paper too. So whatever's easiest.
Yeah, and as well, I mean, I'm here to assist you all through this process. So if you all as commissioners and city staff feel that, hey, maybe we should just schedule a special session or do it at the next planning commission meeting and actually sit down as a group and talk about it, I'm happy to be there and help facilitate that as well, or any combination thereof. So whatever you all feel may be best for you, this is also just my recommended approach.
Hey Jim, are you guys gonna use paper? Or will you just?
Either one, I have to do this.
I'm probably more likely for me to get it back from the computer. I'll do that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, good. So I would definitely do the computer too. I mean, I think we're gonna have some folks that will do it on the computer and open it up.
Okay, yeah, that's no problem then. I'll
Great.
get that, I'll get to work on that and get that back to you this week, because that shouldn't take me much time to get put together.
Good, thank you.
You just won't forward it.
Yeah, and then once we get it, we'll forward it to you guys.
Okay.
Okay. Well, if there's no questions about that, I'll move along with the comp plan work. Is that okay?
That's great.
All right. And no rush on that, by the way. Just to be clear, as long as you can get it to me within a month, then by the next meeting, I'll have that all put together. So get it to me before the next time you all convene, and I'll put it all together and then give it back to you all in a final format for that. So regarding the comp plan draft, just want to go back to it real quick. Everything that was recommended, so I'm assuming you all have seen the feedback from the extension service and the public, and everything in there I implemented into the draft comp plan, excluding writing out the narrative format for it, because I just want to double check on a couple things before I make those, because that'll take additional time. It's just a lot more investment to write out that narrative, and I have to go back and delete it all. So in looking at that, I've implemented all that, so if you're curious about what I've done in the draft, you can just go look at those public comments, and that's what I've done in there. So if it recommended to delete a section, I deleted it. If it recommended amendments, I amended it, or certain language changes, I did exactly what was proposed in there, and primarily based on the professional recommendations. But there's a few of the public comments I'd like to ask you all about this evening. So before we dive into the public comments, couple other key changes that I made to the draft comprehensive plan. If I saw that the extension service or anyone else pointed out that a strategy or recommendation of the comp plan conflicted with state law, I removed it. Which included two big items I saw in there. There were mentions about exemptions from property taxes, and I had to delete at least just the text that referenced exemption from property taxes. The reason being is when I've discussed that with other attorneys or municipalities, counties, or even state officials, we've all concurred that that is not a optional mechanism for municipalities and counties to implement, aside from what's already permitted under the IRS or state code. And what they were talking about there was like incentives for relocation or business investment. And it's just not something that is permitted under state code at this time. So does that make sense?
It does.
Okay, is there any questions about the removal of that? Because that's kind of a big deal, because that impacts funding mechanisms, right, for those things. But you can still do other things. B&O, tax incentives, or other things still exist, especially under home rule. If you all are a home rule community or choose to become one, that you all could implement. We, for instance, Fairmont has one. We have a B&O exemption of, we reduce our B&O rate in half for a developer who builds more than 5 housing units at a time. So those are things that are legally allowed under state code, provided you go through the home rule board to get that approval. So those are all fine. The other recommendations are fine. The other thing I removed was a recommendation there about consolidating all of the public hearing process for planning and development things, such as trying to merge a public hearing, a meeting in which a project might apply for both something for the Board of Zoning Appeals and the Planning Commission and other related boards and commissions. So that had to be removed. That is very specific in state law that we do have to keep those separated. and you all as planning commissioners can have no involvement in the Board of Zoning Appeals, and vice versa, because they override you all. They're the only override, so therefore neither board or commission can really interrelate to one another. So I had to delete that out of the draft comp plan as well. So although I could see your all's intent, just kind of what was recommended to streamline the review process and get these projects moving forward quicker, unfortunately that is just not an option.
I didn't think of that.
Yeah, that was a big one. So I was actually surprised that was in there. I'm assuming that probably came from student recommendations and not you all or,
Right.
or anyone else. Yeah. So all that's been fixed. I got all the, so basically I found, those were the two big legal issues I saw. I was talking about property taxes, and talking about the way you handle public hearing processes and public meetings. So those were eliminated. What I want to ask about is I saw a lot of public feedback about there being concern that some of the proposed changes would make your zoning ordinance in particular too complex, and that there would be too many layers that may make it counterproductive to what you all were trying to accomplish. So I don't know if that was coming just from one citizen or anything like that. You know, that report does not point out who made those statements, but I did see that again and again. And so what I wanted to ask you all was, this is where it's a bit more of my expertise, is zoning and land use regulations and development regulations in particular. And after I spoke to you all last time, that I had some concerns about the proposed future land use map because it downzones much of the parcels in your city, so it actually makes them more restrictive. And so what I wanted to ask was, I think there's some recommendations I could put into your comp plan and I could draft into your narrative and your strategies and goals that I think would be much more advisable for a community of your all size. For example, it talks about, in the comp plan, creating a light industrial district, a heavy industrial district, an institutional district, when really 2 or 3 of those could all be summarized into something what we would call an employment district, or maybe just a general industrial district that has certain regulations to it. And especially for communities your all size, I wouldn't recommend just zoning 1 or 2 parcels to one district. I mean, why add pages and pages of rules and so forth for just a few parcels of land, pending potential annexations that the comp plan talks about. What I would honestly recommend is actually kind of paring it down a little bit and reducing the number of proposed districts. How do you all feel about that as experts on your own community? Do you feel that you need more zoning districts? I think it's proposing like over 13 of them at this point.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I think we need to simplify. I think that's been the position of this commission for quite some time, is to try to simplify and to bring those down in levels that's just a lot simpler. And I agree with some of the comments that it can get too complicated at times. And so I would agree, we should not have that many districts, in my opinion. We have a lot of similarity in our city with business and residential and things of that nature. I think we can bring that number down, Shay. I really do.
Yeah, that's my professional recommendation as well. And honestly, there was another thing in there that gave me concern. Your comp plan draft discussed proposing 3 or 4 new overlay districts. I do not recommend that.
Okay.
And I think for the items, like, it was talking about an overlay district for floodplain areas, an overlay district for accessory dwelling units, an overlay district for certain institutional uses or certain commercial types. And so then you're talking about like up to 16 or 17 zoning districts. And in my experience, overlay districts are a hyper-specialized things for very particular areas in which there's context that justifies maybe making it very, very, very special. And once again, I just don't recommend them as a regular thing. And what I've done actually already, and when you all look through this timeline table of strategies and goals, you'll see that if the word overlay was in there, I changed that out for overlay or regulations, overlay or development regulations, or some other type of terminology to infer that you could accomplish what it was recommending in multiple ways. And you didn't have to actually directly do an overlay district. Does that make sense?
It does.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't, already people don't like talking about the Z word much in West Virginia. It's becoming more popular. I have towns calling me all the time to talk about it. But to make it more convoluted, especially in a smaller town, I don't advise it. And so what I will do then is I will make some recommendations, and this is what I want to get into. Draft a new future land use map, which I already said I'd do. But these couple things like eliminating districts and changing stuff up, it's going to take me some time, and I didn't want to dive into that without talking to you all about it first. So that's what I will do, is I will go there and change that. And same with your commercial districts. It proposes 4 different commercial districts. I think we could honestly pare that down to 3. You don't need a bunch of, you need your little neighborhood corner stores, you need your downtown, and then you need your general convenience commercial and your highway stuff. I think for your all's community's development pattern, that's really what you need. Because even that neighborhood, like corner store district that's proposed, which they call the neighborhood commercial district, that can actually serve multiple purposes and can be a very flexible district as well, and not just be your corner store. And I can write out the language in the draft comp plan to talk about the intent of all of those new districts very explicitly, to make sure it's clear, make it easier on you all going forward to get it implemented. Okay. Yeah, any questions about the proposed zoning districts? Because that was a big headache for me.
No, I will have a lot of questions later. I understand there's a lot of legality that has to take place when you're doing a lot of that with announcing to the public and how you do that. Is there a lot to that when you start changing that all up?
It depends. So sorry to give you an attorney's response to that.
Yeah.
I just had the municipal league ask me the same question. It depends, because the state of West Virginia has specific regulations about what to do under certain circumstances when zoning is changed. So luckily for you all, depending on what we recommend, it could be very simple, and it could just like open up the opportunity for somebody to apply to rezone their own property based upon this future land use map. And you all make it very easy to approve them, because it blatantly says in the future land use map to approve them. Now, if you need to create new districts, that can take a little bit of time, but there's multiple ways to do that. So there's multiple ways to handle that with the public. It could just be amending existing districts, which is oftentimes what municipalities do. You just cement what's already there. And then if somebody wants to apply to rezone it, or you all want to take the effort to rezone it, either party can do that, and the notice is a little different for each of those mechanisms.
Okay.
Now, one thing to be clear that is very hindersome in West Virginia is if you want to increase the residential density of a piece of land via zoning. So if you want to take, for example, something that's single family now, and you want to open it up even just to be for duplexes, you have to send a certified letter out to every single property owner impacted.
Yes.
And I think you also, there may be other requirements as well, such as like posting signs on the property and so forth to create notice for that. And that's where it gets very burdensome. When you go to, this is why I was concerned about the down zoning proposed in the future land use map, because it it's very hard to upzone, it's very easy to downzone, so once you go down, it's hard to go back again.
Okay.
So it's very important for that. Now, there's other mechanisms available, and for example, what you could do, if you all, as the planning commission, would advise this, if you look at that future land use map and you say, hey, this looks great, let's draft up all the rules for all these districts as proposed, let's get that written up as a draft, and then let's just propose to completely repeal your zoning code, and then adopt a new one simultaneously, which you can do via a single ordinance. There's a special set of public hearings that has to happen and input sessions involved in that with a repeal and readoption of the zoning code. But you all could actually adopt and change everything and rezone everything in one fell swoop. More upfront work, it's all done immediately.
Wow.
So, yeah, the city of Fairmont did that in 2006. And it was, it worked fine. It was a fine mechanism for them. So I've never personally done it, but it is a legal option under state code. So that, right, you can sit there and talk about it parcel by parcel, block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood, or you could just literally toss out the whole code and adopt a new one simultaneously. So the state gives you a lot of options on how to handle that.
Okay, good.
Yeah, definitely something when you all get into it though. Definitely have a planning expert or an attorney really sit down and go over it too, because you don't want to, especially with like a full repeal and readoption, you want to make sure all your I's are dotted and T's are crossed. Because even like in Fairmont, it got challenged legally, it went to court. So a couple citizens didn't believe that it was fair public notice and fair due process and so forth. But it was upheld by the West Virginia courts and found to be compliant with the notice process and the hearing process and so forth. So, but right, it can raise issues, so you want to make sure it's buttoned up real tight and done well. So definitely consult somebody when you go to do that. Any other questions about that before I move on?
I think we're good.
Okay. Covered that. Okay, so with that, where we're at is once we get this timeline figured out, and once I change some of those narratives and redraft that future land use map, I think we're looking at the semi-final and final version of the draft plan. That's where we're at in this process. So we're nearly at the finish line with it. With that, I would still recommend, even if I get the whole thing into a semi-final draft, we still have one more of these meetings, and I'll send the whole document over to you all to go over, and we'll discuss it in brevity so we're not here for 2 hours. And maybe even make it available to the public or however else you want to do it, to show that semi-final draft and then talk about starting the procedures to forward it on to the city council. I really think we're that close with it.
That's great.
So, yep, that's my assessment of where we're at in the process. So, are there any questions about that? I mean, any expectations of you all around looking at that final draft?
I think Mr. Wedge has a question.
Shay, should we not know whatever might be involved in this whole process that the state of West Virginia or federal law dictates that we might need to make or put it down as our #1 priority to address it first? Looking down at the bottom on the brownfields, that's just one that I see that made me think of it, that there's got to be some things that the city, I don't want to say this in front of the mayor and his council, but there might be some things in here that the city needs to take a look at immediately, as opposed to, you know, what's coming first here, dog or the tail, which is wagging which, you know what I mean? Prioritize
Yep.
those requirements that need to be addressed immediately that may affect some of the other things. Am I making any sense to you on this?
That does make sense. So on the first note there, the state nor the federal government have any requirements about what a community prioritizes over other elements of their comp plan. So they don't have any requirements of this. They just expect each community to set their own priority level and their own timeline. When it comes to if we're going to put the cart before the horse on any of this, I will make sure to read through this line by line to your all's responses and double and triple check that. This, in fact, this document here isn't even fully finalized because the numbers, if you all read through this, you'll notice there's some numbers that are skipped. And that's because I did not want to finalize this until you all had seen it and then you all give a priority level. And I may go back and renumber this, reorganize it a little bit. And I will also make sure that it's like, you know, for instance, you mentioned brownfields. So if you go to maybe do like a bad buildings assessment, which is available through the Northern Brownfields Assistance Center and the program that they offer. With that, you may want to do that before you start doing your redevelopment
That's
planning
what I'm thinking.
of your Main Street. And if I see that that's out of, like, one is a short term and one is a midterm, but one's before the other, I will personally go in and recommend an adjustment, and I will talk about that at our next meeting about why I changed it.
Okay.
That's a good point.
Yeah, or if there's any other glaring things that come in out of order, I'll make sure to highlight that and to change it to make sure it's applicable. And maybe it's an instance such as both related items are short-term goals. And that'll be fine. Within the narrative of your comp plan, it often says do this and then this. Or do this and then it's related to this, please go reference this other section of the comprehensive plan. And it does discuss that in there to kind of help guide the community to its implementation. So there is a little bit of that language already in there too.
So you're basically going to restructure this layout here once we do all the grading that you've talked about. You'll come back with kind of a list of items that are in the short term. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, the findings as a whole, both short, mid, and long term and ongoing, and talk about whether, I also recommend as a professional planner, whether that was an accurate assessment of that or not. But I don't think it's appropriate for myself to go in and make any first assumptions and then hand those to you all, because I do want to respect that you all know your community better than myself, and you all understand the needs and maybe the priorities of your community. So I want to give you all the first chance at it, and then let me advise whether some things are out of step or out of order, or that A needs to happen before C. And so I will make those recommendations after seeing what you all submit back. And so I will make sure that the timeline here is in as best of order as we can make it. And of course, let me be clear too, if there is a mistake, say we all make mistakes, we're all humans. This is not binding. This is a guideline. And so if something's short-term and something's midterm and you all accomplish a midterm item before a short-term, which you probably will, that's okay. That's okay also. So it's not going to impact your comp plan or what's the term I'm looking for here? I apologize. Basically, it's not going to invalidate your comp plan if you happen to do anything out of order. It's not going to get you in any trouble. It's just a recommended guideline of when to do things. But it is required by state law. We put that guideline in there.
Any other questions? Councilman LaRose, Mayor Schaefer, do you guys have any comments or?
I'm good on mine.
Okay.
Good here as well.
Okay. I would like to set a timeline on getting back to you, Shay. Is Shay still on there?
Yep, I'm
Okay,
here.
good, good. Are we to that point, Shay, where we can look and schedule?
Definitely. Like I said, my next set of amendments to this draft plan are my expertise, so I expect to move on these very quickly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, really, to be frank, I'll be ready when you all are. So, I'll probably get the future land use map done this week. I will get the draft of the districts done within the next week or two, and I expect to send that over to you all as soon as I get a draft of that to review ahead of any meeting as well. And then as soon as you all get this timeline recommendations information back to me, it should only take me about a week to get all that compiled as well, and then put back in. So really, if we want to schedule our next meeting, I'm completely comfortable with that, and I believe we'll be making great headway at that next one.
Great. Looking at my calendar, obviously, we're headed into a difficult month to plan with the holidays.
Just scratch it off.
Does anybody have any suggestions? I mean, it looks like giving you a fair amount of time to do your work, Shay, that's pushing right into the Christmas week.
Yeah, I'm looking at my monthly calendar right now, just to make sure I don't have any conflicts. Of course, let me just look.
Jim, you want to push it?
And really, you all always meet on Mondays, correct?
What's that? Early January. I think so too. I hate to push it too far, but how about the first week of January?
January 3rd?
No, that's too close to New Year's.
Too close to New Year's?
Yeah,
You want to go to the 10th?
fine with me. I don't want to go to third.
Jim?
We've got council Tuesday.
Yeah, we have council, so on the 10th it'll be a council meeting. I mean, we could push it to another day that week, I guess.
Yeah,
We could
sure.
go to like a, I have something on that Thursday.
Yeah, see,
I guess-
that's just,
We could
Yeah,
go-
if you're looking at early January, I am unavailable the evening of January 6th and January 11th, because I may end up being at city council or our board of zoning appeals for the city of Fairmont these nights.
Okay.
But I should actually know for a fact whether or not that'll happen within the next 30 days, because I always do a 30-day notice before any of our public hearings.
What about that Thursday?
Of the 13th. I have something that I think, let me
You decide. I'm in pretty good shape for all of them, except council.
Tuesdays and Thursdays are bad for me. Let me see.
What about the 17th, Gary? Just leave it on Monday and kick it to the 17th.
Yeah, that really works for me, Mayor. I hate to push it that far, but that works for me. If that works for you, Shay, does that work for everybody else?
what's the date?
17th, it's a Monday.
That is a federal holiday.
What's that? Martin Luther King Day.
Good for me.
And for me,
It's good for me.
Well, I know I'm off work that day, so that's easy for me. So if that's good with you all, that's good with me.
Mayor, do you think that will present any issues?
Absolutely not. 17th is good.
Okay. Let's schedule for the 17th. If I could, let's set a schedule that we can get, how much time do you need to be comfortable, Shay? I think going out to the 17th, we should have plenty of time to do our work. How much time would you like to have, to be fair to you, so that I can give them a deadline in regard to turning everything in?
If you all could have the timelines back to me before Christmas,
Okay?
that would be ideal. If you get them to me in the next 2 weeks, that's even better. So, but before Christmas at the latest.
Okay.
When will we get them?
In that case, what I intend to do then is submit a semifinal draft to you all before New Year. So give you all a couple weeks to kind of review that at minimum on your own accord, and then bring it back for that meeting on the 17th, where I think it'll make that discussion easier. Because I don't know if you all are particularly interested in me sitting there and walking through that draft comp plan paragraph by paragraph or anything. So I'd get it to you ahead of time for you all to review on your report.
When will you be formatting this on the computer to send to us?
Really, just over the whole month of December, I'll be going ahead and making edits to it. I won't be doing anything kind of graphically interesting necessarily.
Yeah.
We'll wait until we know that it's got the language and the things that we want in it before we talk about, that's why it'll be a semi-final draft, before we talk about like adding pictures or charts or, I don't know, right, really sprucing it up, because that is an option that I can do for you all. I am a graphic designer as well. So, we could, if you're talking about that, we could spruce that up later, but I'll have at least a Word, like a PDF, a Word document version for you all to look at.
Okay.
That'll be very straightforward there.
Will you be able to throw?
I'll have that in December.
Will you be able to put this in a format for us relatively soon? The work that you gave us, so we can answer
Google form.
on a Google form?
Yeah.
Because I think once I have that, I mean,
I can make it better, so.
I can bring it right back to you pretty quick. But we can give you, 2 weeks?
As soon as I get that, I can get it done.
Yeah. What's your?
I mean, really, if I put it on Google Form, a lot of you could probably get it back to me in the next 24 hours after I make that. So
Absolutely.
it should, yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. So we'll look for that, and then we're going to say, I see no reason that we can't bring it back to you before Christmas, but as soon as we have the Google form, I think we can get it right back to you.
Okay. That sounds good. I'll get that done this week, and I'll get that over to you all.
Good. Sounds good. Any other questions? So we are looking at January 17th at 6 o'clock for our next meeting. Okay?
Okay. Gary, I'll go ahead and say now, without a doubt, I do intend to be in person on that.
Okay?
Apologize for tonight. It was just extenuating circumstances with my employment, but I will be there in person on the 17th.
We'll try to hold the snow off then.
That's all right.
No problem.
I got a Subaru. It'll be fine.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thank you for your time. Again, Councilman LaRose, Mayor Schaefer, thanks for joining us. And we'll see everybody back on January 17th. I look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.